Us now is Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat of California. Thank you for being here tonight, sir. It's nice to see you.
Thanks, Rachel.
So, have you spoken to the Republicans on your committee, Chairman Nunes in particular, about what's being reported here at Politico? They've had this secret, parallel, under-the-radar investigation going on for weeks, apparently?
I have not talked with Chairman Nunes since the article came out, but I should say this. I have been aware of a particular working group that crosses different committees that's dedicated to doing these things. But I have certainly been aware of a couple of things for a long time, and these are things that we have raised the alarm bells about, and I think we need to raise them even further at this point. And that is initially, rather than really focus on the Russian intervention in our election and the issue of the connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians, the chairman and others on the committee were focused instead on trying to build a case that the Obama administration was either illegally wiretapping the Trump administration or that they were illegally unmasking people. So the focus was on unmasking. Now, when they found nothing there, they moved on instead to trying to discredit Christopher Steele, to discredit the FBI. And I think we are seeing really an intensification of that effort. And I think it's driven by the idea that if they can discredit the dossier and Christopher Steele, that somehow they can make the whole Russia investigation either go away or they can impeach the results of what Bob Mueller comes up with, regardless of whether it has anything to do with the dossier. And I will say this just to underscore what my colleague Mark Warner said. This is a real precarious moment for our democracy when you have two categories of Republican members in the Congress. One category that is basically saying and acting the part that if this investigation gets too close to threatening either the president or our majority and our chairmanships, we are prepared to burn the House. And a second category of Republicans who are standing mute while they do it. And that makes it a very precarious situation. I think these attacks on the institutions, these attacks on Bob Mueller, which are completely unfounded, really threaten to do incalculable and long-term damage to the whole administration of justice in this country.
Can I ask you just a technical question about how these things work? I know that the Intelligence Committee is a different kind of thing than the other committees in Congress. You're allowed access to very, very sensitive, very secret information. You obviously have special procedures and even special physical facilities for being able to handle information. You work closely with the intelligence community and its various agencies, and members of the Intelligence Committee. Being a member of the Intelligence Committee sort of comes with some extra prestige because of that, because you're entrusted with that kind of high-level information. Are members of the committee allowed to take materials, including the classified materials that you guys obtained for the purposes of the Russia investigation, and instead secretly start using them for something else entirely that they do without informing the rest of you?
Well, you certainly can't take any classified materials outside of the Schiff, outside of the classified space, unless there are very specific procedures in place and you're taking them to another classified setting, and it's done following very specific protocols. That just can't be done. You certainly can't take classified materials from the committee and share them with members of other committees. We have to actually have a vote whether to allow other committee members to come into our Schiff, our classified space, and view materials. Now, whether people on the committee that view classified information can use it for other purposes, if we're doing an investigation and we uncover things that concern us about the performance of agencies, yes, that can be considered. The problem, though, is not that the GOP members came across information that was of concern, but rather that there's been a concerted effort from the very beginning to try to build a case, any case, against Mueller and the FBI and the Department of Justice. And much of our leadership, unfortunately, has never stopped being a surrogate for the White House. We had that problem at the very beginning of the investigation when our chairman went on that midnight run to the White House. But that problem has continued, and it's taken different forms. After that White House incident, you then had an effort to basically focus on unmasking. And after that was unsuccessful, you had an effort now to focus on discrediting the FBI and Christopher Steele and Bob Mueller. But the constitutional crisis this can bring about is the administration is encouraged by this, if they're watching that spectacle in the Judiciary Committee and listening to Republican members talk about a coup and talk about criminal activity in the FBI, that will encourage the president to think that he can fire Mueller with impunity, or perhaps even more pernicious from my point of view, fire Rod Rosenstein, put in place someone who will tell Bob Mueller privately, you cannot look into these issues, you cannot follow the money, you cannot consider or investigate whether the Russians laundered money through the Trump Organization, guaranteed loans for the Trump Organization. You can't look at any of those things that could provide leverage over this president by the Russians.
Congressman, I know time is short and the river rises. I have one last question to ask you briefly, which I'm pretty sure you can't answer, but I'm going to try anyway. And it is about these reports that your committee is planning on interviewing Rona Graff, who was Donald Trump's longtime assistant at the Trump Organization, and also potentially Felix Sater, who's a controversial figure. He's an ex-con who was mob-associated, who was also involved in the secret plan to try to build Trump Tower Moscow during the campaign. He's the one who said that real estate project would result in Trump being elected. It's been reported that those interviews remain for your committee and that one or both of them may be happening in New York City instead of Washington, which I can't figure out. Can you confirm that that's happening, and can you tell us if you know why those things are happening in New York, if that is indeed the fact, if that is indeed the truth?
You know, I can't confirm as to any specific witnesses, but I can tell you this. There are two witnesses that are very significant that we have asked to be brought before the committee for months, that the majority has refused to invite before our committee, that they did schedule. One of them today, while we had the tax vote, was scheduled to be interviewed out of state. And that interview went forward against our protest at a time when we were here voting on the tax bill and none of the members could participate. They have a second interview they've also planned for out of state, another key witness we've asked for months. Why is this happening, Rachel? I think the reason is they want to jam these in at the end of the year. They really don't want the members to be present to hear what these witnesses have to say. And it's part of an effort to close this down beginning in the new year, to go through the motions of an investigation when they're not particularly interested in what the witnesses can contribute in terms of information on the issue of collusion, for example. They just want to shut it down and focus on discrediting Bob Mueller.
Congressman Adam Schiff, top Democrat in the House Intelligence Committee.